Rain in a biblical context symbolized blessing. It was a necessity. It was a necessity for growth and a necessity for the plants and the herbs of the field to grow. If you're living in a rural society, and if you're a farmer and you're dependent on the land, then you understand how important the rain is. You see, when the rain comes down, you have the nourishment to feed your plants. You have the sustenance that is needed to be able to nourish the ground so that out of the ground, the seeds that have been planted in the ground can come forth. And when those seeds come forth, they bring forth fruit. And then that fruit can be taken to feed your livestock and feed your family and produce that which is needed for society. You know, today we take for granted, especially in a modern day society where we have grocery markets and superstores where we can go and sometimes 24 hours and get what it is and have our choices pick of fruit and our best choice of meat. But seldom do we think about how it came to be. See, that's the thing about convenience, and when you're separated from a thing, it becomes easy to be able to appreciate something, to enjoy it without having to consider how it came about. Oftentimes we take for granted the presence of the Lord because we have been so exposed to it, and especially in this house we've had the Word so profoundly taught to us and fed to us on a regular basis. Come on, wisdom, you know what I'm talking about tonight. We've been so blessed to receive of the Word that sometimes we're guilty of taking it for granted. Maybe I'm speaking to myself tonight, but I know that there are times when, especially when our pastor has taken the time to really delve in the text and to extrapolate not just a simple message, but to really dig deep and to inquire of the Lord, to hear a word. Sometimes I know I take it for granted because I sit and I hear it and I receive it and I say, oh, what a good word. But how easy it is to take for granted that which has been given to us.
Go ahead.
This is the situation that was happening in Israel. For see, Israel in this generation, they are so far removed from Egypt. They're so far removed from the trek from Egypt across the wilderness in those 40 years into the promised land. They were so far removed that they didn't understand that there was a price that was paid for them to be able to inhabit this promised land. They didn't realize that there was a cost that was paid. See, they were so far removed from the situation that they didn't realize what their ancestors and their forefathers had to endure to be able to get to that promised land. See, it didn't come easy. The stripes that Pharaoh and his henchmen administered to the children of Israel, they hurt. They were painful. Israel had to endure a time of bondage and a time of captivity in order to be able to get to a place where the Lord would have them to be. So often, in order for us to appreciate the good things that the Lord desires to give us, sometimes He'll allow us to go through a period of dryness. A period of where we seem that we are in a situation that we just can't get out of. I don't know about you, but I know that I've been sometimes in some situations when I felt like I just couldn't see the end of it. Or I've been in a situation where I just was so consumed by grief, or consumed by my bills, or consumed by my own mind. See, the mind is a powerful thing. And the enemy so often will try to control our mind because he who controls the mind controls the man. And one of the chiefest tools of the enemy is to get us so wrapped up in our situation that we can't see anything else. Because see, when you are wrapped up in your situation, it's hard to see beyond it. When you're so wrapped up by grief, when you've lost a loved one, it's hard to recognize that life does go on. When you're so, I don't know who I'm talking to tonight, but when you are so, your heart has been broken and wounded and you feel like you just can't even conceive. Sometimes people talk about living day to day, but sometimes you're trying to live just minute to minute. And even in that minute, you can't understand how you're going to get to the next minute. Why? Because you're so encumbered by situation that it's hard to see beyond it. But sometimes the Lord will allow us to be in those situations for a time, because when we come out of it, there is a greater appreciation for the blessing that He desires to give. When we come out of the storm, there's a greater appreciation for, see, when you have to work for something, you appreciate it so much more. When you have to labor and put your hard-earned money or energy or your time into something, you appreciate it that much more. Why? Because you recognize the price that you had to pay to be able to get that thing that you wanted. You recognize that this thing didn't come easy, that it wasn't just something that was just handed you to by the wayside, because like they say, easy come, easy go. But you recognize that there is an intrinsic value into this substance that you've gained. So it is with the Lord. Oftentimes He allows us to go through situations, to sit in a period where we may feel as if we're dry. We may even sometimes feel as if we've been abandoned. But He will allow the situation, because the situation is meant to give a revelation. In this time that we're talking about, in this period of Israel's history, there was an extreme famine, and the famine was a direct result of the people's disobedience. See, ease and comfort in Zion had caused them to get slack in their ways. And kings and rulers who had come into this kingdom that was supposed to be the Lord's chosen people, that was supposed to be His people, kings had come and ruled and had no regard for the law of the Lord. They had no regard for the prophets who came time and time again to declare the word of the Lord. See, that's the mercifulness of our God. Even when we're doing wrong, He'll send a word. You see, one thing, if we can only understand this, and this is a foundational principle, is that the Lord's desire is to dwell with His people. That's at the very heart of what the Lord's desire is, for to dwell with His people, to be with His creation, to be in the midst. That's why when you look in the Old Testament, you see the type and the shadow of the tabernacle. It was always right in the midst of the people. It's not for no reason, but the Lord did it specifically to show them, this is where I want to be, right in the middle of you, right at the heart of you. Why? Because it's not His will that any should perish. You know, we say these verses all the time, but I wonder if we really understand what that means. It's not His will that not one person should perish. Because to perish, when you break it down, means to be eternally separated from Him. So in other words, it's not His desire that one person be eternally separated from Him, but it's His desire that all should have life and have it more abundantly. That's why He came. And so when we ignite and engage in sin, it grieves the heart of the Lord. Why? Because God is perfect. And a perfect God cannot dwell with a sinful people. A perfect God can't commune and can't spend time and can't engage with a sinful people. But I'm not talking about the one-time sin where you trip and mess up and something happens and you run back. But I'm talking about habitual sin. Continual sin. Like we see in the book of Kings, and I encourage you as you go through the week to take time and to read the chapters before to understand what is happening. For just to give you an idea, here we had King Omri, one king before this chapter, who came and took reign, and the Bible said that he did evil above all the kings that were before him. In other words, you couldn't find anyone worse than Ahab. You couldn't find anyone worse than Ahab until his son came along, that is. Because the Bible said that Ahab, Omri's son, did worse than all those that were before him. So you know, if Omri was bad, Ahab was 10 times worse. No regard for the word, no regard for the prophets, no regard for the laws of the land. And the Bible said that if it had been a light thing, in other words, all that they had said about Ahab, as if it had been a light thing. It wasn't enough that he was just evil and disregard the word, but he went and took a woman to wife from another people, from another kingdom, after the Lord expressly said that that was not to be. And so there's a continual, habitual life of degradation that Israel is getting to and is immersed himself in. And the Lord said that because of this, the Lord shut up the heavens so that it would not rain. It was a direct repercussion of their sin. The Lord had set warnings, had set a call to say, come, listen, here's what you're doing wrong. See, the Lord chastens those whom He loves. Why? Because He chastens, because He wants us to turn. He wants to say, listen, He's sounding the warning sign, say, hey, listen, this what you're doing, not good. Turn away. This is the right way. You know, we're going in one direction, for there's a way that seemeth right unto man, but that way leads unto death. And the Lord saying, no, I don't want you to die. I don't want you to be separated. So come back this way, turn around and walk this way and follow me. But when we continue in a path of sin, we are distancing ourselves from the Lord. And the Lord continually will send a word and to send a word. But there comes a point when the Lord will shut up the heavens. There comes a point when the Lord will stop speaking. And that's the point when we need to worry. Because if the Lord is not speaking, if He's not chastening, if He has gotten silent, we're in trouble. If the Lord has shut off the lines of communication between us and Him, then how do we know where we're going? How do we know? And furthermore, how do we get back? How do we get back to that place we're in right relationship with the Lord? This is what was happening in this time of Israel, and because of their sin, because of their degradation, the Lord shut up the heavens. He cut off the line of communication. He said, no rain until I say so. Why? Because this land is filled with degradation. This land, who's supposed to be filled with my people, who are supposed to do things my way, have distanced themselves because of their own sin. It's like my mother always says, those who don't hear will feel. And let me tell you, church, Israel was feeling it. Because for 3 years, 3 years, there was no rain. Someone say no rain. For 3 long years, not a single drop. For 3 years, no moisture coming down from the heavens. For 3 years, no nourishment for the crops to grow. For 3 years, no waters coming to fill up the reservoir so that they can take the water and to feed their animals to be able to do the work that needed to be done. 3 years, no rain. Not one drop. For 3 years. You know, after a while, when it doesn't rain here, we don't get a decent rainfall, they start putting up water advisories where they say that you can only water your lawn on even days or odd days, before, depending on where you live or whatever the case may be. And I remember back in 1999 when I was living in the States, they even had a control on how much water you can use in your home. And of course, people were getting upset. People were getting mad because you can't tell people not to bathe and not to use so much water. Why? Because we're so accustomed to having to be able to turn on the tap and get what we want. We're so used to it. We take it for granted often that we can turn on the water and be able to bathe and to shower and have water to drink and have water to do all the things that we do. We take it for granted because it's always there. Until someone literally turns off the tap. And then we get upset. Remember, I think it was just last month or so when there was a water advisory in most of the island of Montreal, and people were getting upset. You know, you go to the restaurant, you can't even order a salad. Why? Because they had no water to wash the salad. So all the simple things that we take for granted, all of a sudden they're coming back into our face because now there was no water. So imagine 3 years of this no water. See, what happens after a while, you can go for a little while without rain. You can go for a little while without getting what you need, but after a while, the well starts to run dry. After a while, the reservoir, the little side reservoir or well that you had dries up. And then when the well runs dry, where do you go?